and welcome to the Peas and Quiet podcast. On this podcast, we discuss all things gardening, including growing veggies and flowers and how to create your dream backyard alongside nature. My name is Robin. I'm an environmental scientist turned full-time flower farmer and gardener, and I'll be your host for this podcast. On today's episode, I wanted to do a little bit more of a personal chat about pregnancy and what my experience has been running a small business throughout pregnancy, specifically how I am continuing to run my backyard flower farm. I chat all about how I have planned and the planning process behind continuing yet downsizing the flower farm. Also what my experience has been so far in terms of being pregnant and physically flower farming, and also the plans for the rest of the pregnancy and post-birth, what my expectations will be about continuing to run a small business. I do want to mention that there is a section in this podcast where I do discuss some triggering points, including things like pregnancy loss, miscarriage, and mental health. So I'll let you know when that section is coming up in this podcast, but I did want to mention this up the front of this podcast in case these topics are triggering for you to maybe skip this episode. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities. We pay our respects to elders past and present and thank them for protecting our lands, coastlines and ecosystems. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Peas and Quiet podcast. Back with another episode today. I kind of had a little bit of a break last week, and I think going forward I might do fortnightly uploads of this podcast just to make it a little bit easier for myself. But I'm back today with another episode, and today I am solo again. I wanted to sit down and chat about my experience flower farming, running a business while pregnant. Now, this episode is just going to be my experience, my personal experience. It's not going to be a how-to guide to gardening and flower farming while pregnant or anything like that, because every pregnancy is obviously so different. And I know that this kind of content might not be applicable to everyone, but I know it is such a big topic of motherhood, your purpose, finding purpose, wanting to work, and how to balance all of this while having children. So hopefully it will be interesting to a few of you. I know there are quite a few mums who listen to my content, watch my content, and I think it is definitely a really big topic, and I wanted to just share my experience on today's podcast, just in case there is anyone out there who is thinking of starting a business or wanting to continue flower farming and wanting to have children and go through pregnancy. I'm hoping that this podcast will be applicable for you. And if not, then I just hope you enjoy having a listen to me talk about how I'm kind of changing things up in the flower farm throughout this pregnancy. What I really wanted to cover today was firstly how I'm planning on running the business, or how I've planned to run the business and flower farm throughout pregnancy, and just kind of chat about the general process of downsizing the farm. So I suppose a lot of this information could be useful for those who might be wanting a break from flower farming or wanting to downsize for whatever reason. Secondly, what I wanted to chat about was just what my experience has been so far. When this comes out, I'll be almost in my third trimester. So I have had a lot of ups and downs so far. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about that. And then also just what my plans are for the rest of pregnancy and also post-birth, what my expectations will be in terms of continuing this business. So make sure to grab a cup of tea or coffee or go about your garden duties that you need to do. I hope you enjoy today's episode. And again, throughout this, I am purely just going to be talking about my personal experience. Everyone is completely different, and I in no way want this to be a guide on how to do things. This is just what has worked for me, just my personal experience. So if you are new here, a little bit of a background. I live here on the south coast of New South Wales, Australia, with my partner and our 2 cats. And Scott and I we've wanted to become parents for quite a while, and it's been our dream for so long. So we are very, very grateful for the position that we're in right now. It hasn't been a very easy road, and I might chat a little bit about that throughout this podcast. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I do think some of the points are important. But basically, we started a flower farm a year and a half ago, kind of was when we got a little bit more serious about wanting to grow flowers in the backyard and aim to sell those at markets, at our local garden stores and farm shops. So that's what I have been doing for the last year and a half, and the business was really, really successful for the scale that I was working at. I have seen it growing monthly, which has been amazing. And I've just thoroughly enjoyed the whole process of growing something on a little bit more of a larger scale that isn't just personally for myself, but actually to share in my community. We have since stopped doing markets. We had a little bit of a break anyway throughout first trimester, just needing a break from gardening, which I'll chat more about. We don't currently sell at markets, and I am gearing up to start taking a few bouquets back down to my local garden centres. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I have videos on my YouTube channel all about establishing the flower farm, how much money we made in our first year, all of the lessons that I learned, all of the flowers that have grown well. There is so much information that I have packed into videos over on the Nature Patch YouTube channel if you're interested in delving a little bit more into that. But yeah, that is just a little bit of a background. And in terms of finding out we were pregnant and planning what was next, there has been quite a few things that I have changed in the backyard with the flowers that I wanted to talk about. And again, this could definitely apply to you if I don't know, you know that you might need a surgery soon and you might need to slow down a little bit, or you're just really burnt out and you need a break from growing, gardening and flower farming, or whatever is applicable to you. There are definitely some things that you can still do and plan in a way that is going to be less demanding physically on your body, but will still be able to kind of have a business growing or sustaining, I suppose. And before I talk too much about the planning process, that is the goal for me, is to not quite grow the business, but throughout everything that I'm going to be talking about, I just want you to know that, I still do have bills that I need to pay for the business, like website fees, subscription fees, and things like that. And this is where running your own business, it's a little different to when you might go on maternity leave from a full-time employer, which you're not personally associated with the company. With a small business and running that as a sole trader, you can still technically go on maternity leave, which is what I will be doing when the time comes. However, I do have expenses that are kind of non-negotiable that I do need to cover. And that is where a lot of these flowers that I'll be growing and products I'll be making in a much more of like a passive way, I suppose, or less physically demanding way, will still be able to allow my business to run and continue to stay alive, and kind of just go into a little bit more of a dormant stage while I have a newborn until I feel up to it to continue growing the business. Also, if you have watched my videos or listened to some of these podcasts, I'm sure you'll kind of start to get a bit more of an understanding of my personality. And this is really important to, I think, know your own personality and what makes you happy. And this makes me happy, growing and running this flower farm. So just keep that in mind as well. I'm not pushing myself in any way. I am just maintaining my own mental health and happiness throughout pregnancy. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast as well, to kind of encourage those who also don't want to stop what they're doing throughout pregnancy, or have it be something that can be detrimental to a business if you are the kind of only person running it. I didn't want that for myself, and so I just wanted to also put that out there. Obviously, I know everyone else is different. Everyone has different personalities. Every pregnancy is different. So enough with the caveats. I'm just going to get into some of the points that I have here. So in terms of the planning process on once we kind of found out we were pregnant, what my plans were going to be for the flower farm, initially I was probably a little bit apprehensive about continuing things, because I didn't really know how I was going to feel. There is so much negativity about pregnant people and how you're going to feel and all of the bad sides of it, which I've slowly learned isn't always going to apply to everyone, including me, and that a lot of people can continue to just live their lives just a little bit differently throughout pregnancy. But at the start, I was initially a little bit apprehensive. But one of the things that I did want to focus on, and what I also, the way the business was going anyway, was to focus more volume, but of the same flower. And I've spoken about this quite a lot in my videos about kind of lessons I've learned, and really about simplifying growing and actually still being able to make a profit. And this is one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from the last few years of growing, is to just focus on more like high value crops, ones that do well in your area. And again, this is going to be completely different for everyone. For me, around this time of the year, that is ranunculus and anemones. So I have quite a few beds of those planted. They're just coming into bloom now, which is very, very exciting. And these are going to be fantastic to rely on throughout pregnancy, because I'm not needing to cut back the plants or trim them or deadhead them too much. They're very, very low maintenance. And that's what I focused on for selecting seeds this year, or throughout the rest of the year, is really those plants that I don't need to maintain a lot of. So the other ones are, I have planted quite a few beds of stock flower. This is a like one and done kind of flower. So you cut it and it's all done. I don't need to worry about trimming back the plant or anything like that. It's pretty low maintenance in terms of pests that I have in my area. I know it really likes my clay soil and it grows really well here. So I made sure to plant quite a bit of that, as well as statice. Again, loves my clay soil, which is fantastic because not all plants do. And I've had so much luck with statice. It was definitely one of my most profitable flowers that I grew. Even just straight statice bunches with like the purple, white and apricot colors mixed in, they sold amazingly, and they were so easy to grow, to harvest, to arrange, to store. I could pick them days in advance, and I always had flowers available for people. So that's again another one that I focused on, and I will be planting quite a few sunflowers. Again, I can just sow the seeds, let them go. I'll be planting these quite close together as well. And what else? Straw flowers is another one. Again, this is a little bit more of a plant that you might need a little bit more maintenance on. However, because it was and is one of the most profitable flowers I grow, because I use a lot of the flowers to dry for Christmas decorations, which I'll talk about soon in another point, that's why I've chosen to grow a lot of straw flower as well. Secondly, how I've planned things is I'm planting things very close together. I previously have been a little bit, a little bit scared to do this. I don't know, because I feel like on seed packets, it's quite a wide spacing that a lot of plants have. And I suppose that is for like your optimal growth so that the plant isn't competing with other plants for nutrients and space and sunlight and everything like that. However, I do find with growing flowers, it's beneficial to plant them closer together. That way, we have a lot of heavy winds here, so they're less likely to flop over, have a bit more support from each other. And I also just get a lot less weed pressure, which I do not want to be dealing with weeds when I am very, very heavily pregnant. So that's something I'm keeping in mind, to just really plant things nice and close together. The flowers might be a little bit smaller in terms of particularly like sunflowers, but I don't actually mind. Some of the varieties that I grow, like the Radiant Sunflower and the Lemon Rush, Royal Velvet, I actually prefer planting those closer together to have a smaller flower head. Some of those massive sunflower heads, it's really impossible to actually add them into a bouquet. And I found that I didn't actually use the largest sunflower heads. So I actually like to plant sunflowers nice and close together. It means also that with the wind, they're not as affected. Maybe some of the ones on the outer edges might blow over a little bit. But they're just so much more useful and usable in bouquets if they are like medium to small size. I can just kind of fit them in with some filler and some other flowers rather than just like dealing with this massive random sunflower head that just looks out of place. Often people aren't really drawn to it because it is so large and it just looks quite hilarious. Unless you're doing like a massive sunflower arrangement, like full of sunflowers, then they might look a little bit better. But for me personally, I just really don't like when they grow too big. So that's why I plant them nice and close together. Another way I have planned to make my life easier with gardening and flower farming this season is to really make the most of cardboard and mulch. We are about to order some mulch and Scott's going to have a great time moving that around. He honestly really doesn't mind. He was the one who wanted to order it, and he gets a nice workout in. So he will be moving that. I'm not going to be moving a lot of mulch. I'll try not to, because sometimes I do have a tendency to just want to work, but I'm being a bit more realistic this time and letting him move all the mulch around. So we're going to be mulching the pathways, the garden beds, and just really relying on that, as well as cardboard, to deal with weeds, because I don't really want to be weeding. I don't want to be weeding when I'm not pregnant, and I don't want to be weeding too much when I have a newborn. So that's what we're planning on doing, is really relying heavily on mulch. I am also cutting out flowers that I've had issues with before. Some of them I'm a little bit sad to do, but again, I'm just relying on those really low maintenance flowers this season. So I've cut out things actually like snapdragons, the Costa variety of snapdragons, which I'm really sad about because I love them. They're one of my favorite flowers. I am growing just a few kind of cottage varieties to plant in my cottage garden, but not necessarily for cut flowers. And that's just because I had a lot of problems with thrips and also caterpillars. I had so many problems with bugs and snapdragons, so I decided to just not grow those this year because it was a lot of hard work just to maintain making sure I had clean flowers. I didn't really want to be sending buckets of snapdragons full of green caterpillars. So I was using organic sprays to kind of deter them. But yeah, I'm not going to be doing that this year. I'm also not growing dahlias, which is sad, but also they're a lot of work to just really maintain, to deadhead, and I also don't really have a lot of tubers left because all of mine rotted last season with the hundreds and hundreds of mils of rain that we had and all the flooding. So I have said no to dahlias this year, and I think any that I do grow, they'll just be ones that randomly were left in the ground. Or I might start a few from seed just to see what I get and kind of have a little bit of a surprise with that. Other flowers I'm also not going to be heavily focused on. I'm not going to be growing scabiosa or the pincushion flowers. They were just too much to maintain and to deadhead, and they went a little bit crazy in the garden. So I'm not going to be planting those. And what's another one? I'm not going to be heavily focused on cosmos, but I do have a few varieties that I'm going to be planting up near the house, near the cottage garden, like the Double Click series, and I think Pop Socks is the other one. And cosmos are ones that I love them so much, and they're very signature to the style of bouquets that I like to make. I love to make whimsical and fairy bouquets, and that's where I need cosmos. So I am going to be growing some of the cosmos purely because it just brings me so much joy. I love the plants so much. They're so beautiful and whimsical. So that is one that I am going to be growing. But yeah, that's kind of the general gist of what I am and what I'm not growing. I think I did forget to mention feverfew. I am planting quite a bit of feverfew in the garden, again, because that's a very easy plant to maintain. I've planted it quite close together, so hopefully I'll have less weed pressure in those areas. And it just goes with everything. So yeah, I love planting feverfew, and I just plant the the single white variety. They look like mini daisies, and they're a staple in all of my bouquets. 100% recommend growing feverfew if you're new to flower farming. Another thing I have been planning to do is create just some products that are really easy to put together. I made Christmas baubles last year, and I'm going to be doing the same this year. I still have quite a lot of dried flowers left over that I will be using in those. And these are really easy to make. I can just stuff the bauble with some dried straw flower, dried statice, and Scott can also make these as well. So last year we sat down and made a lot together. They're really simple to make, and then I can just send 50 down to my local stores and they can sell them. They get a percentage from the sale, and I also get something out of it as well. So it's a little bit more of a passive way. It's not really passive because I do put work into actually growing everything and then making it, but more so passive at the time. I don't have to harvest a lot of flowers. I can just have products ready to go, ready to take down. Same as all of the bath salts as well. I can make some of those and have them ready for Christmas. And the last thing that I've been mainly focusing on is really how I can work on feeding and fertilizing my crops in terms of what's physically or what I'm going to be physically capable of doing. And a lot of that has been foliar feeding. So again, I've spoken all about the foliar feeds that I create in terms of the weed teas and comfrey teas and worm teas that I make here. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on to amend the soil or the plants, I suppose, where I don't have to be carting around fertilizer, breathing that in, or worrying about moving too much compost or horse manure, which is more Scott's job. I can just go around with a little bit of a spray bottle and spray the plants to feed them and keep everything nice and healthy, and just kind of, deal with any bug pressure in that way, in making sure that the plants are really nice and healthy, and then they can kind of sustain themselves and be really resilient against any issues that they might have. So that's a little bit on planning. I wanted to talk about what my experience has been so far with pregnancy and flower farming and how I've actually felt. And the first trimester, that was basically a write-off. I really didn't feel like doing hardly anything throughout that time because I was really, really nauseous. And I know this is very common. Thankfully, I wasn't like to the point of actually being sick at all, but there was a lot of times where I was running to the bathroom, like asking Scott to make me Vegemite on toast, bring me some crackers, all that good stuff. And I don't really remember doing much gardening in terms of maintaining the garden then. All I was doing was just harvesting a few flowers and making some bouquets here and there. And you probably would have seen in my videos, some of those were, I was a little lackluster in terms of my personality in some of those videos, but it was a real struggle, and that's totally fine. It's very expected, and I do really think removing a lot of expectations for that first trimester, more so around for me, this is my experience, from around week 9 to week 12, end of the first trimester. That's when I felt my worst, and for a few weeks it was just kind of getting by and doing the bare minimum that I had to do, and that's totally fine. However, going outside and gardening, it is really, really crucial for my mental health. And I made sure, even though I was feeling quite sick a lot of the time, to definitely make sure that I did get some kind of fresh air and be out in the garden here and there. And particularly in the second trimester now, where I felt really, really good. I'm sure that may be a slow decline, but we'll see. I might still feel good over the next few months physically. It'll just be a lot slower. But really making sure I have been utilizing the garden for my mental health. I've had quite a few down days. I'm not going to lie. It's been kind of difficult. If you listen to the episode with Scott and I, where we chatted just about some issues we're having with neighbors and dogs and all that kind of stuff, it has been really, really challenging these last few weeks to just get a bit of peace and quiet in my garden. And it's also been a little bit hard to adjust to not having the stamina to kind of keep going and getting fatigued here and there. At the start, it was like I was a little bit down about it, but honestly, like having the garden and the flowers bloom has really kind of helped me keep going and helped me find that purpose that I was probably lacking when I was feeling at my worst. Throughout the first trimester as well, I had a lot of anxiety, and this is the part of this podcast where I'm just going to discuss some topics that may be a little bit triggering. So I wanted to just warn you now that I am going to be talking about pregnancy loss, miscarriage, mental health, those topics for the next few minutes. So if that's something that may be triggering to you, then please do skip ahead. This is something that I haven't discussed publicly at all. I have chatted quite a lot on my Patreon about our experience with trying to conceive, but we did actually go through a pregnancy loss last year, which was probably the worst time of my life. I will say that it was definitely, the worst time of my life. So back in March last year, I found out I was pregnant, and I was pretty sick at the time and kind of thought all of that was very normal, had some blood tests. Everything looked okay, although my HCG, my pregnancy hormones, were very, very high, which they thought kind of indicated a twin pregnancy, which it didn't end up being. And I had some scans, and there was a lot of abnormalities in that scan in terms of what my uterus was looking like. And I progressively got more and more sick throughout that pregnancy. until they had me in for another scan, and that day I was diagnosed with a molar pregnancy, and it ended up being a complete molar pregnancy, which I'm not going to talk too much in detail about that, but it is basically a non-viable pregnancy that requires surgery to terminate the pregnancy. And so I'm sure you can imagine those few months leading up, knowing that something was wrong and then having to have surgery was incredibly hard for us. And that was at the time of, starting this flower farm, starting to think about selling flowers, what I was going to grow. And it ended up turning into a year of utilizing the garden for me to mentally get better as well, which I hid very well from all of my YouTube videos. You definitely would not have known what I was going through, but post-surgery, I had about 5 months or so of very regular blood tests, which started weekly blood tests, then fortnightly, then monthly. And that's because with molar pregnancies, there is a likelihood of developing a certain type of cancer post-pregnancy after terminating a molar pregnancy, in terms of the growth of how things grow in your uterus. So that's why you need weekly and then fortnightly and monthly tests to make sure that your pregnancy hormones go down over time, or else there's indication that something has gone very wrong. And so for those months, I was basically on edge, not knowing what my body was doing, whether I was potentially going to have another surgery, or go through other things that I really didn't want to have to do medically. And I know this got quite deep very quickly, but it is a reminder that everyone's got something going on with their life, and we all make decisions to better our lives, or at least try to. And that was really a catalyst for why I wanted to pump out so many YouTube videos last year, work so hard on the flower farm, work so hard to do markets, because that filled me with so much joy and happiness. Thankfully, my HCG levels decreased over time, and I could heal properly. And then we were cleared late last year to start trying to conceive again. So it was basically the duration of a pregnancy that I had to wait and go through. I mean, it was a pregnancy, but it was a long period of time. And honestly, without the flower farm and the garden, I really don't know what I would have done. So coming into this pregnancy, I knew that was making me happy, and I was incredibly anxious, obviously, at the start of this pregnancy, to know that everything was okay. I had lots of early tests and early scans, and thankfully I pushed for all of those, which is very hard to do, to advocate for yourself in many medical situations, but it's what I had to do. And I also knew that, I really needed to figure out some way that I could continue this flower farm throughout this pregnancy, because of my past experience and knowing what got me through. The thing about gardening that I think so many people need it for their mental health is that it's something that you can really rely on, and rely on a process from start to finish. You can plant a seed, watch it germinate, watch it grow, and then reap all of the rewards. Granted, you might not, get everything from all of the seeds that you plant, but it is such a good thing for your brain to be focused on, not to dismiss anything else you might be going through. I worked really hard on other things to get through hard times. However, there's something about gardening, and I know you are probably thinking the same thing, that it does something for your mental health. It's, you're also outside, being around greenery and living things, and it's such a hopeful experience, which when you are so down, or so anxious or so tired, or you're just really over pregnancy or whatever, it is such a hopeful experience to be able to grow things and harvest things and be outside in the garden. And so this is really just, my experience of flower farming and running this business while pregnant has been quite, I don't want to say easy because that's not the right word, but it has been a non-negotiable, really. It has been a non-negotiable because I know that it's the one thing that makes me incredibly happy, gets me through my days, gives me purpose in life. And I truly think, it's really important to find something like that to get you through pregnancy or hard times or whatever you might be dealing with or working through. It might not be gardening for you, but I'm sure there is something that does spark that joy, and that's what I really needed to cling on to. So yeah, wrapping up this kind of little section, my experience so far has been really great with gardening. It's really helped me find a purpose and, a reasoning for getting up on those days when I didn't really feel like it. I wanted to get up because I wanted to see if my seeds were germinating, or if I needed to water something, or if I needed to harvest something. Because the previous summer, while, I was still going through a lot of difficult times, I was still waking up and harvesting buckets and buckets of flowers, taking them to the market, taking them to the garden centre and all of that. And that made me so happy. And, I've just been changing that up a little bit now, being pregnant, and, physically things are just different. So yeah, I think overall the experience of pregnancy and running a flower farm has really taught me, it's really taught me to just know what you need for your mental health. Obviously there's physical benefits too to gardening and, growing things, but that it is really important to prioritize that, and also just to be mindful that self-care for one pregnant person might be completely different to another. For me, it's like self-care is potting up a tray of straw flowers, or while I'm listening to a podcast or a YouTube video. Other days it's watching flower farming videos to get inspired about what I want to grow and what I can grow in the future. Even though this season is a lot slower, I know that I'm always going to have that joy of growing things. It's for me, it's not the typical relaxing day of a day spa and pampering session that I know probably Scott would want me to have. But yeah, just knowing that everyone is different, and just finding what works for you that's been really crucial for how my experience has been so far. And I think just my experience last year with going through pregnancy loss has just really, it really taught me that there are certain things in my life that I need and that are non-negotiable. And yeah, that's just a little bit of more of a personal insight to some of the things that I deal with and that I have been dealing with over the past year or so. I know miscarriage and pregnancy loss is incredibly, and just fertility issues in general are incredibly common. And really there's no right or wrong time or way to talk about it. And, obviously I'm in a very, very lucky position right now. However, I don't think that diminishes or makes it any less important or less of a better time. I don't know. It's just really about when I have felt comfortable to discuss this topic, and I feel comfortable about it now. Just to mention. And I thought, adding this into this episode might be the place to do it. So we'll move on to the end part of this podcast now, which is I just wanted to chat about a few things that have been helpful for me throughout pregnancy and a few plans post-birth that I have. In terms of what's been helpful, your body changes so much with pregnancy. So again, this will be different for everyone. For me personally, I've really found a kneeling pad has been a lifesaver to help me be able to continue to plant plants and do all the weeding that I want to do. It's just been really helpful to help prevent any back pain. Luckily, I haven't had any pains yet, except there was like 1 week of round ligament pain that I just had to be very careful with. But I've always been very interested in weight training, and I think that's really helped me to kind of be aware of which muscles I need to target for my body to carry extra weight around my stomach region, and also how to just activate glute muscles and hamstrings for when you're bending down. I think if you're going into pregnancy, or you might be worried about weight proportion on your body and what muscles to use, going and seeing a personal trainer is really important, or a physio, or whatever you feel comfortable doing, just to really learn how to activate muscles. That's been really helpful for me to prevent any issues. I'm still sore after a day. I'm not like running around, and I'm not excited to make dinner and all that kind of stuff. But I've just been really mindful that I don't want to have any bad injuries that may prevent me from being out in my happy place in the garden, and just being really careful about bending down and getting up and using muscles in a way that they're designed to be used, basically. And I've also just been getting help where I need, I'm still using like the wheelbarrow here and there and carrying trays and all those things, but just not going overboard, knowing your limits and how much you can carry. I have amazing midwives, and their advice, which I'm not sharing or giving advice right now, I'm just sharing my experience and what I've been told and what works for me. But generally what you can do pre-pregnancy is fine to keep doing, but just modifying certain things. So definitely using a kneeling pad, not using your ab muscles too much, not relying on your back muscles too much. Obviously not lifting heavy bags of soil, that's Scott's job, and all of those things. Really relying on your partner if you do have one has been that's been really helpful for me. Also just keeping really hydrated. So I have I'm looking at it right now. I have a stainless steel water bottle, and it has been dropped so many times. It is so dented and so well used, but it's insulated, and I use it every day in the garden. I'm always trying to keep hydrated. Also wearing gloves. I have been cycling through gloves and washing them and making sure that I always have clean gloves on hand. I haven't been dealing with any heavy fertilizers or anything like that. And if I do need to make up potting mix or spread blood and bone on the gardens or whatever, I'm just using a face mask for that. Electrolytes as well, important if obviously they're approved by your midwife or doctor or anything like that. That was really helpful for first trimester when I was struggling to get fluid into my body. And I'm sure this will probably come back in a few weeks because it's getting warmer. I feel it getting warmer outside, so I might jump back on the electrolytes soon. Also just having lots of breaks, which has been really nice, just to we have some seats set up now around the garden, and I can just go to the nearest one, have a rest, enjoy some water, enjoy a snack. Fruit has been really helpful to just snack on fruit throughout the day. And just, knowing my limit. Knowing your limit is really the key of this whole podcast, really, is knowing what is important to you and what you can physically do and physically can't do is just important to really just check in with yourself. And I definitely know my limit. I can't be doing things like the bush regeneration that I was doing weekly last year, or working outside every day. I am currently just doing a few days here and there, with it being 4 hours, 4-hour day kind of thing in the garden, and then I'll have a rest for the rest of the day, and just taking it really easy. Some of my expectations or plans post birth, I'll chat about a few of these. Um, Honestly, I still do plan on taking bouquets down to my local garden centre and selling those Christmas decorations and bath salts. The way I'm going to be doing that, though, is relying on probably Scott to go just run them down. Obviously, again, I'm not putting any expectations on myself. These are just things that are the plan and that I would like to keep doing. Again, just to keep kind of covering my costs, but also to keep my mental health in check. I am someone I can function pretty well on low sleep, and he's going to be sleeping so much as a newborn. I think I am going to have the time to be able to do that. Again, I'll just be kind of focusing more on those passive products, like, again, not that they're passive, I hate that word, but you know what I mean. The things like the bath salts and the Christmas decorations that I can already make. I can basically make them now and have them ready to go. Scott can just run them down. It'll also mean I'll probably be doing bunches of the same flower, a lot of them. So again, like I said, bunches of statice and straw flowers. They do really well around here. Super easy to harvest, and Scott can go harvest them. He's more than happy to help out here and there. Once I show him how to do one thing, he's happy to just go and do it himself. And it is going to be important for us to have, breaks from inside and, taking care of a newborn. So that's our plan for that. And I'll be, growing a few summer flowers, maybe some zinnias here and there. But I think the majority of the garden is just going to be whatever's left from spring, and also just whatever food we're growing. And that is all Scott's domain. He's focusing on growing food this year, and he's really interested in that. So he'll be, taking care of a lot of that. So that's kind of what my expectations are. I'm really not placing too many upon myself, depending how the birth goes, obviously. And that's really all I can do and all you can do preparing for a baby and working throughout pregnancy, running your own small business. I think as much planning that you can do to put in place is important. And if that helps you, then that's fine. And I just really want to let nature do her thing over the next few months, grow some plants, and whatever I'm able to harvest, I can do that. However things do go, though, I really do expect to be outside and enjoying fresh air, even if it's just from the balcony for a bit. Whatever I have to do, that's just what's important to me. So I need to do that for myself. I need to be the best mother that I can be, and taking care of myself and my mental health and really prioritizing that is going to be really important so that I can care for my child. And I don't know what I'm going to feel like after birth, and what that's going to look like in terms of just my mental health. So I have been trying to put in a lot of effort into just making sure that I have systems in place and I have things that I can do to keep busy, to just like feed my personality and feed my mental health. This is all just, what works for me. And none of this might be applicable to you. And that's perfectly fine. That is the beauty about just knowing yourself, knowing what's important to you, so that you can also be the best mother or the best parent to your child. And I'll tell you now, this baby boy, he loves being outside. He is moving so much all the time when I'm gardening and when I sit outside and have a bit of a break. He is just having the time of his life, and I really do think that he's going to really enjoy the garden and being outside. So that'll be really nice to have a little friend coming around with me in the garden, and I can show him all of the beautiful flowers and all of the beautiful food that we're going to be growing in our garden. So I might wrap that up here. I know this was a little bit more of a kind of like a personal chat about what's, my experience so far. And again, I know this isn't going to be interesting to everyone, which is perfectly fine. But if you have made it this far, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen and just, listen to my thoughts basically. I do really hope that I came across as just reflecting upon my own experience rather than, my intention isn't to just say you should or shouldn't do these things. It literally has just taken me so long to kind of get in my thought process about, how I wanted to talk about this in a way that is respectful to all bodies and everything that pregnant people go through. There's so many things, but I wanted the underlying message of this podcast to really just be stay true to, what's important to you, what's important to your happiness and your mental health. Because from my personal experience of going through some really, really tough times, that is literally what got me through and what got me through the first trimester of this pregnancy and has continued to help me out coming into now basically finishing the second trimester, and I'm sure will be very important for the third trimester and then giving birth and experiencing a newborn. I think it is really important to take care of yourself, what's important to you, and if that is running and continuing to run your small business, then by all means do that, just in a way that is gentle to yourself and just doesn't stress your body out. So thank you so much for joining me and listening to today's podcast. I hope you're all having a lovely day wherever you are in the world, and until my next one, happy gardening everyone. Bye.